Good afternoon. My name is Sarah. I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 impacted various communities in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. Today is February 13th, 2023, and this week there were 164 reported cases of COVID-19 in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County area, which actually shows a decrease of 23% over the last 2 weeks. For the comfortability of our interviewee, he's not wearing a mask. I am wearing a mask. Will you introduce yourself, Jeremy?
So I am Jeremy Lytol. I am an adult services librarian at the Allegra Westbrooks Regional Branch on Beatties Ford Road, which is a little bit of a mouthful to say, but we're very proud of that name. Miss Westbrooks, back in the 1940s, late 1940s, was hired to be the librarian at the Brevard Street Library, which was at the time one of the only libraries accessible to African Americans in Charlotte. The system, of course, as much of the South was, and honestly even much of the North, was segregated. Shortly thereafter, if I remember correctly, in 1950, she became the head of acquisitions for the entire system.
Wow.
So, as I understand it, you had a woman who could not visit, say, the Davidson branch, which I don't think it's in the same building, but Davidson had a branch at the time, if I remember correctly. She couldn't visit the branch, but she was buying books for the branch.
Wow.
And then when the system integrated in 56, shortly thereafter, she became a supervisor of branches, which made her the first African American in the state to have multiple library branches reporting to her. Wow. There's one manager in the Triangle area who was a branch manager before her, Molly Lee Houston, if I remember the name correctly.
Wow.
But Miss Westbrooks was the first one to be kind of a system supervisory level. She had a tremendous impact in the system. A lot of the people that have been in the system for a while were trained under her. She retired in 78, I believe, and then she passed in 2018. And shortly after, the library board made the decision to rename the library after her.
That's amazing.
One of the unfortunate things with COVID was we were planning a big celebration of that. It was going to be April 2020. Okay. We were all gearing up for it, and then, of course, COVID happened, so we weren't able to have the celebration in the way we intended. But we are very proud of that name.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing the history. I never knew that. Thank you.
I love talking about it.
Yeah.
You asked me to describe myself. I would describe myself. I'm fairly tall, 6'4". He's fairly stocky, generic white, brown hair, brown eyes, nondescript face, beard.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jeremy. So how long have you been working at the Allegra Westbrooks branch?
It has been 10 and a half years now. August of 2012 was when I started here.
So you've been here for a good amount of time.
Yeah, I love the community. I feel like we get the best of both worlds in a lot of ways because on the back of the branch, we have a huge neighborhood, so people can literally walk to their local library. But then on the other side, on the front, we're on a busy commercial corridor. We're right next to the interstate, so we also have a lot of kind of destination visitors who have to drive to get here. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, I feel like. We're not tucked in some out-of-the-way area where only local residents know.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of the people in our community have lived in here in the community for years. So it's constantly happens. People will be waiting in line and somebody will go, "Were you in Miss So-and-so's class in second grade?" Or, "Are you so-and-so's daughter?"
Stop it. That's amazing.
It's like so many people know. I mean, it's like everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
But then again, we also get, not so much since COVID, but before COVID, we would get a lot of the foot traffic that you would get at a large library as well. So we kind of have the feel of a smaller, close-knit community library, while having the advantages of a lot of the foot traffic of a busy urban library.
Okay, I love that. Before Allegra Westbrooks, were you a librarian somewhere else?
No, I actually graduated with my library degree in December 2011.
Okay.
And then in June was picked up part-time at our South County branch.
Okay.
That was kind of an interesting story. I didn't actually interview for that job. I'd applied for a different job. I didn't actually interview for that job. It was part-time. I was only applying for full-time. And I'd actually interviewed for a librarian job. Lost out on that one, but the interview team liked me enough. They recommended me to the hiring manager for the part-time team. The system had just expanded hours. We'd just opened up on Sundays.
Okay.
So they were hiring for a bunch of positions. So instead of having each branch do their own hiring, they had central teams.
Okay.
But they recommended me to the head of the part-time hiring team. It was actually kind of funny. I got the letter saying, "Oh, you didn't get the librarian job." I had a monstrous headache. Telemarketers were just starting to call cell phones. So my phone had been ringing off the hook with telemarketer calls.
Wow.
My mom had called like 3 times. And again, I had a headache, so I was done with the day.
Yeah.
And then it rings again. And it's an unknown number, and I'm expecting to be a telemarketer. So I answer kind of gruffly, "Hello," ready to just be incredibly nasty to this person because it's been the 6th call of the day and I'm done.
Yeah.
And it was someone with the library calling to offer me a part-time job.
Wow.
But because I hadn't actually applied for that job, they did allow me to interview. Usually you had to wait 6 months, but they did allow me to interview 2 months later for the full-time librarian job that opened up here.
Awesome.
And I'm happy to say I got it. I've been here ever since. I really, really love it here.
Oh, that's amazing, Jeremy. I'm so glad to hear that. Before we started this recorded interview, we did an activity together called a hand map. Is there anything from your hand map that you would like to share with us today?
Honestly, I'm not used to thinking of myself like this, so I'm still kind of digesting some of it. Some of the emotional responses I put down, obviously I put down uncertainty. Obviously with COVID, I mean the world changed. We're getting back in some ways to where we were, but the world changed.
Yeah.
In ways I think we as a society are still processing.
Yeah.
Then I also put down, anger and frustration. I do think the response from the political leadership we had at the time, of course, 2020 was an election year, so we were still under Donald Trump, and I feel like he tried to downplay everything and did not take it seriously, and that led to I think more deaths. I think I don't want to say it was his fault or it was all his fault. I think we would have been in for a rough time no matter what. But I think having a federal government that was not that invested in taking it seriously and promoting safety measures, I think it caused more deaths. I think there were people who are now deceased who would quite possibly be alive. Then also, especially, there are some on the left, but especially among the right, the people who refuse to wear masks. I'm not wearing one now, but I've been wearing one all day. And the only reason I'm not wearing one now is my voice just does not carry. So if I were to wear one, it would sound like I was talking like this the whole time, and you would never be able to hear me.
Yeah.
But the people that refuse to wear masks, the people that refuse to wear vaccines, they definitely have made it worse. I won't share which organization it was, but there was an organization in our area that continued to hold events. Mecklenburg, this is part of historical records. I'm sure anyone will be able to figure out what I'm talking about. But Mecklenburg County actually had to close the venue for a time. I still won't patronize that venue because they knew the risks and they did it anyway. And it was Mecklenburg County's largest super spreader event, and people died from it. So the irresponsibility and it just infuriates me. The fact that we don't care enough for other people to do something as simple as wearing a mask. And then the resistance to vaccines based on rumors, not actual science. Of course, there are people who just medically, their immune systems can't handle a vaccine, and then under advice from their doctor, they don't get them. And that's perfectly fine. But the people that could get it but just believe the rumors on Facebook or the talking heads on especially Fox News, and that just won't get it, not because they can't handle it, but because they just, I honestly don't know. It honestly, makes me very angry because they've made it so much worse, and so many of the people that have died might not have had people been willing to take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah. How did that impact you personally, especially as a librarian?
So, not as much as it might have. I was fortunate. I actually just had my first personal experience with having COVID about a month ago.
Wow.
Martin Luther King Day, I woke up and went, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
And it was, I got a COVID test. I'd managed to dodge it since then. I fortunately haven't personally known anyone who's passed from it. Of course, I'm relatively antisocial, so I don't know that many people.
Yeah.
But I do have friends who have lost relatives, relations. I grieve for them. The biggest impact was in 2020 when the library shut down. We were closed from middle of March through March, April, May. So we reopened on a very limited basis at the beginning of June, which also kind of, I think, makes me angry. I'm not a legal expert, but as I understand the governor's order at the time, we would have had to close for some period of time. But then we remained completely closed, just offering virtual services for 10 weeks, which, I greatly appreciate administration's concern and their care for us, the fact that they wanted us to be safe, but to some extent, as public servants, we do take on a certain level of risk. We work in a public place, so anyone could walk in with, a cold, the flu, whatever. So I feel like we should have reopened earlier, and I feel like in a lot of ways we still haven't recovered. We're definitely not as busy at this branch as we were. It used to be you almost couldn't work on anything at the desk because you'd have two people at the information desk and one person assigned to the lab, and more often than not, all three of you would be in the lab helping people the entire time you were on the desk. You'd really only run back to the desk if the phone rang.
Yeah.
Now we don't have anyone stationed in the lab at all, and the two people at the desk, more often than not, are working on projects most of the time. We have bouts where we're busy, but it's nowhere near the foot traffic we used to have. And even the computer traffic, we have a very large computer lab. I think now with some of the renovations, there might be one library that has a larger lab, but we have one of the, if not the largest computer labs in the county. We have 53 internet computers for adults, plus another 12 for children and 3 express. Before COVID, you wouldn't really have to wait, but they're more than, I'd say 75% of the computers will be full most of the time. Now, we're lucky if we get to 25%. Some of that is, because we were closed for 10 weeks, people who rely on the library for internet access had to make other arrangements. And of course, some of it is for positive reasons, like the MECTech program the library is engaged in now. The library, through a grant, is giving away 20,000 computers. They're refurbished Linux laptops. But that's 20,000. That's a significant number. Yeah. I think they're giving away about half of them at this point. Shantae Namos, the Adult Services Coordinator, I think that's not actually her title anymore. They changed it, but I don't remember what they changed it to. Shared a infographic this morning showing which zip codes people were in, and the top 3 zip codes are all between us and West Boulevard.
Okay. Yeah.
So some of it's positive reasons, but I feel like a lot of people made other arrangements and found other ways that bypass the library. I think a lot of it has to do for us shutting down for a full 10 weeks. Now, granted, on a personal level, that 10 weeks was wonderful because I mentioned I'm antisocial. I didn't leave the house. I got to stay home. On a personal level, it was wonderful. As horrible as it was for the world, that 10 weeks was wonderful. I loved staying home. Yeah. But on a professional level, I can't help but feel that we let the community down.
Do you feel like patrons have expressed that?
Some, not so much recently. At this point, we're February 2023, so almost 2 years after.
Okay.
But yeah, especially early on.
Yeah.
People would express that.
Mm-hmm. So how about you now? Now that we have transitioned out of the lockdown into more restrictions being lifted to now where a lot of restrictions were lifted, how has that transition impacted you?
It's going well. We've started in-person programming. I mentioned I have to be somewhere at 5:30. It's actually our computer class.
Okay.
I love teaching the computer classes. We just restarted them in January, in person anyway. We've been doing virtual and one-on-ones for a while, but we just restarted the group computer classes, in large part because it took us so long because we were using the lab as storage space.
Yeah.
And we finally got it cleared out, and then we had to wait on IT to update all the computers because they hadn't been used for 18 months at that point. And then we went through a period where we were very short-staffed, and I was the only adult services librarian here, and I just didn't have the capacity for it. But I'm very excited to be able to get to restart those. I love teaching them. It's wonderful seeing some of the people that aren't comfortable with technology that like to come to the in-person programs. Some of them we've been able to see virtually for a while. It's also nice to have the flexibility to do like a hybrid program. Some of our book clubs, some of the customers aren't as comfortable driving at night, and so they like to take advantage of being able to use Zoom and come in from home and then see the people in the room. So it's nice to have that flexibility.
That's awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. Do you feel like COVID or the last few years, not necessarily just COVID, but the time that we've been impacted by COVID, there was a lot of other things that were going on, like social justice movements, shootings in schools. I know those are just two things that a lot of people talk about. Mental health. A lot of people talked about that. Do you feel like there has been anything that's really shaped you, an experience over the last 2-3 years?
Not so much shaped, but maybe hardened. The social justice movements, I was moving in that direction already. You can't work in an area like the Beatties Ford Road corridor. Last time, it's been a little while, so it might have changed a little bit, but last time I did a demographics check, in the mile around the library, I want to say it was like 95% African American. That might be, it might be less. I don't remember the exact demographics now. This was for a report I was doing for a grant. Maybe it was like half mile around the library, and then it drops as you get a little further away. But it was still, our area has a very large African American population, so that's most of our customers, and most of my colleagues here at the Allegro Westbrook branch are African American, and I don't feel like you can work that closely and not realize there is something fundamentally broken in our society. Is something that makes it a lot harder for minorities, and I would say especially African Americans, to be as successful as they should be. So I was moving in this direction already, but having the time to do a lot of the reading during that 10 weeks, and then coming back here and working with some of the social justice programs, it's definitely pushed me further into. I don't want to say I realize just how bad things are, because being white, I don't know that I necessarily can, because I don't experience it. Mm-hmm. But further into realizing just how much our society needs to change, and how much we owe Black people in our society.
Yeah, that's huge and heavy.
Now imagine trying to live with it.
Yeah.
Black parents. I'm not a parent myself. I'm single, and even if I ever meet Mr. Right, we're never having kids, because I love admiring other people's kids, but I don't ever want kids of my own. But just trying to think about living, worrying that your child will be more of a target for, say, police brutality, or for, you mentioned the mass shootings. Most, not all, but most of which have been done by, it must be said, white people, many of whom were white supremacists. Living with that, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's challenging for sure, 100%. And heavy, again. Yeah, for sure. So,
and I will emphasize at this point, I probably should have said this earlier, but even though I am a library staff, I'm speaking as a person here, not as a member of the library staff. And that's true for most of this.
Yes, definitely. This speaks to your story.
The library has to be neutral. So, like, getting back to vaccines, the library doesn't have a position on that, because we can't get into political like that. Yeah.
Jeremy, I asked you a question before we did the recorded interview of who supported you, who was there for you the last few years. Can you speak to that?
My family. I live alone, but I've got family in the area.
Okay.
The first couple of years, we didn't really get together for holidays, because by that time the library had reopened. I was working with the public, and COVID, much like a cold, you come down with it and are contagious for a short time before symptoms manifest, at least as I understand it. I'm, again, not a science person. So I was worried working with the public. I didn't want to risk spreading it to them, so we do long phone conversations.
Yeah.
But family, the staff here in the branch, the branch manager at the time, who has now moved on, was wonderful. A current branch manager is wonderful. The entire management team, honestly. Mm-hmm. A few friends, we'd get together virtually. Remember right when the shutdown, we closed on a Tuesday, and that night was an in-person get-together with friends, the last one for about 2 years.
Yeah.
I think you also asked, like, who inspired me.
Yeah.
What I put down was the people that worked through the whole thing. Again, I mentioned we had a 10-week shutdown. Part of that, I was reactivated to work virtually, usually for only 10 hours a week. I don't remember now. It wasn't a full 40 by any means. But again, that was mostly behind the scenes, content creation, meetings, research, little public interaction. But the people, like, who were in the grocery stores, those kind of people who worked throughout the whole thing, who came to work every day, and who pioneered many of the things we still have now, like the plexiglass shields. That takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. And then the people like the small business owners who had to suffer through being closed. But who made it work. Of course, there were government programs for some of that, but the people who didn't have a lot of the advantages that I've had, but who made it work.
Thank you for sharing your story, Jeremy, and for sharing about your experience. Do you have any additional stories or experiences that you want to share with us over the last 2-3 years?
I'm sure I'll think of a million once I leave the room, but not really, not that I can think of.
It's okay. I appreciate you very much and appreciate your time today and appreciate you talking about your experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.